A quiet invitation now extends, beckoning one into a slow and gentle journey through the echoes of ancient myth and the whispers of forgotten history. It is a moment to soften the ambient light, to find comfort beneath a warm covering, and to allow the clamor of the day's demands to recede into the distance. These are not merely tales, but enduring narratives that have traversed millennia, meticulously preserved and passed down through countless generations, much like cherished, hushed secrets. This evening, these profound stories will be unveiled, not with a sudden burst of dramatic flair or a rush of modern urgency, but with the deliberate, measured cadence of a storyteller sharing wisdom by the soft glow of a flickering flame. Each narrative promises to unfurl at its own unhurried pace, akin to observing wisps of clouds gracefully drifting across the expanse of a twilight sky. Regardless of whether one finds themselves in the quiet of midnight in a bustling metropolis like New York, or perhaps greeting the nascent hours of morning in the historic heart of London, or even settling into the tranquil embrace of night in Tokyo, a unique sense of time pervades this experience. For within the immersive realm of these ancient accounts, the ordinary ticking of the clock seems to slow, stretching and bending to accommodate the timeless nature of the stories themselves. As the world outside begins to hush, perhaps a gentle whir of a fan might offer a soothing, almost imperceptible hum in the background. With the scene now perfectly set, the journey into these profound narratives is ready to commence. The first story to be unveiled tonight is titled, How Pandora's Box Destroyed Humanity in 5 Minutes. Long before the very notion of one's distant ancestors even flickered into existence, in an epoch preceding the naming of cities or the ingenious invention of the wheel, humanity existed in a state of profound simplicity. Their lives were meticulously synchronized with the rhythms of the natural world, awakening with the dawn's first light, nourishing themselves when hunger stirred, and surrendering to sleep as darkness enveloped the land. There was no concept of tomorrow's burdens, for the future, in its serene predictability, always seamlessly unfolded. Observing these nascent human beings from the majestic heights of their Olympian palace, the gods, frankly, found themselves in a state of considerable ennui. One might endeavor to imagine the sheer weight of possessing boundless universal power, yet finding little of genuine interest to occupy such omnipotence. Zeus, the sovereign king of this divine pantheon, often occupied his regal throne, his fingers idly drumming against its polished surface, his gaze fixed upon the tranquil, predictable world unfolding beneath him. The mortals, in their unblemished simplicity, were to him utterly uninteresting. Indeed, one might naturally conclude that such pervasive peace and unwavering predictability would constitute an idyllic existence, and by all logical measures, this assessment would be entirely accurate. However, the Olympian deities harbored a markedly different perception of what constituted true entertainment. Their divine tastes leaned heavily towards dramatic upheaval, towards intricate complications. They derived a peculiar, almost detached pleasure from observing mortals grappling with adversity, struggling to unravel life's perplexing challenges, much as one might observe a colony of ants meticulously navigating and overcoming the myriad obstacles strewn across their path. On one particularly uneventful afternoon, Zeus found himself engaged in a conversation with his brother, Hephaestus, the esteemed god of fire and intricate metalwork. Hephaestus, perpetually cloaked in the dark residue of soot from his ceaselessly active forge, was invariably found either tinkering with some nascent contraption or in the methodical process of creation. "I have conceived an idea," Zeus declared, his tone carrying the subtle inflection of someone who had just formulated a thought that to them seemed remarkably astute, though perhaps its true sagacity remained to be rigorously tested. "What manner of idea has captivated your divine mind?" Hephaestus inquired, his focus unwavering from the gleaming golden bracelet he was painstakingly shaping with his hammer. "I desire for you to fashion for me a woman," Zeus articulated with a definitive air. Hephaestus's hammering ceased abruptly. "A woman? Are you referring to a mortal, human woman?" "Precisely a human woman, yet not merely any woman. She must be rendered perfect, endow her with unparalleled beauty, infuse her with an insatiable curiosity, make her so utterly captivating that her allure becomes irresistible to all." Thus, Hephaestus dedicated himself to the task. With his colossal yet remarkably dexterous hands, he began to sculpt the clay. With painstaking precision and an almost reverential slowness, he meticulously formed delicate fingers, then gracefully articulated elegant shoulders. He meticulously crafted a face that conveyed both an innate kindness and an intriguing veil of mystery. Upon the completion of his intricate work, he stepped back, his gaze falling upon his creation, which lay perfectly still upon his workbench. "She requires the spark of life," he pronounced. It was then that Zeus, with a profound breath, imbued the inert clay figure with the very essence of life, and in that instant, her eyes fluttered open. They were deep and intelligent, brimming with an unspoken inquiry about the vast world stretching out before her. She slowly pushed herself to a sitting position, her gaze sweeping around Hephaestus's workshop with an expression of unadulterated wonder. Every single detail was novel to her. The array of tools meticulously arranged upon the walls, the mesmerizing, fiery glow emanating from the forge, the pervasive warmth radiating from the hearth. "What designation shall be mine?" she inquired, her voice a soft, nascent melody. "Pandora," Zeus responded, his voice resonant. "Your name is Pandora." The other Olympian deities subsequently assembled to greet this extraordinary creation, and each bestowed upon her a unique and potent gift. Aphrodite, the goddess of love and beauty, granted her a radiance so profound that even the most vibrant flowers would instinctively turn their petals towards her as she passed. Athena, the goddess of wisdom and craftsmanship, endowed her with an unparalleled dexterity, enabling her to weave intricate tapestries, prepare exquisite meals, and create with consummate skill. Hermes, the swift messenger of the gods, bestowed upon her the gift of curiosity, a quality that, in retrospect, would prove to be perhaps the most perilous of all. Apollo, the god of music and poetry, gifted her a voice so melodious and enchanting that it could coax even the most reticent birds from the branches of trees. However, the final offering came from Zeus himself. A box. It was fashioned from a dark, lustrous wood, polished to a silky smoothness, and adorned with an array of intricately carved designs around its perimeter. Its dimensions were roughly equivalent to a modest jewelry box, the kind one might typically place upon a dressing table. Yet its most striking feature was its lock, a substantial, ornately crafted mechanism that conveyed an unmistakable impression of never having been disturbed. "This artifact is for your keeping," Zeus declared, extending the box towards her. "But you are forbidden. under any circumstance, to ever open it. Is this injunction clearly understood?" Pandora carefully accepted the box. It possessed a surprising heft, more substantial than its appearance suggested, and felt curiously warm to her touch. "What wonders does it contain?" she ventured to ask. "That," Zeus replied, a smile playing upon his lips that held a disconcerting lack of genuine warmth, "is precisely the knowledge you must never acquire. For anyone who has ever experienced the irresistible pull of a forbidden instruction, Pandora's subsequent feelings would be instantly recognizable." The box, though its physical weight remained constant, seemed to grow progressively heavier in her hands, burdened by the escalating intensity of her contemplation. What profound significance could necessitate such rigorous confinement? What peril could be so immense that even the omniscient gods themselves harbored apprehension regarding its contents? Zeus subsequently dispatched Pandora to Earth, to that pristine world where humanity pursued its simple, uncomplicated existence. She arrived in a small, self-contained village, where dwellings were meticulously constructed from local stone and timber, where the inhabitants diligently cultivated their own sustenance, and where every individual knew their neighbor by name. The villagers extended a warm and genuine welcome to her, a gesture often extended to newcomers in such close-knit communities. Pandora seamlessly integrated into this novel way of life. She swiftly mastered the art of baking bread, her loaves consistently emerging from the oven with a perfect golden hue. She acquired proficiency in weaving, her finished cloth proving to be both more resilient and more aesthetically pleasing than any seen before. She cultivated friendships with ease, and people gravitated towards her, seeking her sagacious counsel and the solace of her gentle words. Yet, throughout this period of harmonious integration, the box remained a constant, silent presence. She carefully positioned it upon a shelf within her modest dwelling, a place where her gaze would inevitably fall upon it each day. Initially, her glances were infrequent and fleeting, but as the weeks gradually unfolded, she found her attention drawn to it with increasing regularity. She would find herself pausing mid-stitch in her weaving, her eyes fixed upon its dark form. She would awaken in the dead of night, her thoughts consumed by its enigma. The box, it seemed, began to exert a subtle, almost imperceptible call, not through spoken words, but through the potent allure of boundless possibility. What if it harbored something truly magnificent? What if it contained the very answers to profound questions she had not yet even formulated? What if Zeus's prohibition was merely a ruse, designed to conceal a marvel too extraordinary for ordinary human perception? One languid afternoon, as the rest of the village surrendered to their customary daily repose, Pandora found herself seated within her home, her gaze once again fixed upon the enigmatic box. A shaft of sunlight, streaming through her window, illuminated its surface in a way that caused the intricate carved designs to appear to subtly shift and undulate. She tentatively extended a hand, her fingers gently brushing against the lock. It was remarkably warm. She then carefully lifted the box, holding it close to her ear. Could that be a faint whispering? An ethereal, indistinct murmur, like distant voices conversing from a great remove. She was unable to discern any specific words, yet an undeniable sensation of something alive, something yearning to be heard, emanated from within the box. Just a fleeting glimpse, she murmured to herself, her voice barely audible, merely to ascertain its contents. I shall then immediately secure it once more. She proceeded to examine the lock with heightened scrutiny. It was undeniably intricate and exquisitely crafted, yet it did not present itself as an insurmountable barrier. In fact, it almost seemed to invite manipulation, as if patiently awaiting the precise moment for someone to finally turn its mechanism. However, she possessed no key. Pandora embarked on a thorough search of her house, meticulously sifting through drawers, rummaging through various containers, and exploring every forgotten corner. At last, nestled within a small, unassuming pouch that had accompanied her journey from Olympus, she discovered a golden key. It was diminutive and delicately fashioned, adorned with the very same intricate patterns that graced the lock itself. Her heart began to pound with a frantic rhythm as she carefully inserted the key into the lock. It slid into place with an effortless precision, as if specifically crafted for this singular, pivotal moment. She turned it with deliberate slowness, and a soft, resonant click echoed in the quiet room. The lock yielded. For a suspended moment, Pandora simply stared at the box. This was the culmination. This was the precise instant towards which her every thought and suppressed desire had inexorably led since the very day she had received it. With a trembling hand, she lifted the lid just a fraction, creating the barest crack, just enough to steal a glimpse inside. What transpired next unfolded with breathtaking speed, occupying precisely 5 minutes, yet its ramifications irrevocably altered the course of human existence forever. The very instant the lid was unsealed, an unimaginable torrent of entities began to stream forth from the box's confines. These were not tangible physical objects, but rather abstract concepts, potent emotions, and profound experiences that humanity had, until this moment, never conceived of. First emerged worry, a shadowy, twisted entity that immediately began to whisper insidious doubts about every conceivable misfortune. Then came disease, extending its invisible, insidious tendrils, destined to inflict upon humanity racking coughs, debilitating aches, and a profound sense of weakness. Jealousy slithered out next, its form a virulent green and its essence poisonous, promptly followed by hatred, a fierce, angry red. Fear came tumbling forth, dragging in its wake terrifying nightmares and pervasive anxiety. Pain then manifested, encompassing both physical agony and profound emotional torment, initiating humanity into the harsh reality that their bodies and hearts could suffer in ways they had never before imagined. Pandora, gripped by a sudden, desperate realization, attempted to force the lid shut. But it was already too late. The lid itself seemed to have acquired a life of its own, and each time she exerted pressure to close it, it sprang back open with an unnerving resilience. An ever-increasing deluge of troubles continued to pour forth: insatiable greed, corrosive envy, profound sorrow, paralyzing despair, devastating famine, relentless war, the slow decay of old age, and the ultimate inevitability of death. Each of these newly unleashed afflictions radiated outwards from Pandora's unassuming house, spreading like ever-widening ripples across a tranquil pond. The villagers, who moments before had been slumbering peacefully, began to stir, awakening with a pervasive sense of unease. They cast glances at their neighbors, and for the very first time, a nascent seed of suspicion took root in their hearts. They surveyed their modest homes, and a strange, unfamiliar feeling of dissatisfaction began to gnaw at them. They looked upon their once simple lives, and an inexplicable sense of emptiness. A feeling that something vital was missing permeated their consciousness. Within the span of those mere 5 minutes, the world underwent a complete and irreversible metamorphosis. Humanity was abruptly introduced to the capacity for coveting another's possessions, to the burden of fretting over the uncertainties of tomorrow, and to the profound, existential pain that transcended the simple discomfort of a stubbed toe or a superficial cut. Ultimately, when the mystical container appeared utterly devoid of contents, and Pandora found herself seated upon the floor, her countenance etched with profound remorse, a faint, ethereal utterance reached her ears from within the box. A gentle yet insistent command bade her, "Wait." The voice implored her to refrain from sealing the receptacle, asserting its enduring existence within. "I'm still here." Pandora, compelled by a renewed flicker of hope, peered intently into the depths of the container, and there beheld a petite, luminous entity. This figure was radiant in its beauty, adorned with shimmering, argent wings and a beatific, comforting smile. "Who are you?" Pandora inquired with a tone of bewildered curiosity. "I am Hope," the figure declared with serene grace. Zeus, the sovereign deity, had also carefully placed it within the confines of the vessel, nestled meticulously at its deepest stratum. It was destined to emerge as the final revelation, and so, with a graceful ascent, Hope flew from the confines of the receptacle to permeate the vast expanse of human existence. She did not manifest with the boisterous clamor or theatrical intensity of the calamities that had previously burst forth, but she was unwavering in her resolve. She gently insinuated into the hearts of individuals the notion that the ensuing day held the promise of amelioration. She reminded them that challenges were surmountable, that suffering possessed the capacity for alleviation, and that even amidst the most profound periods of desolation, there remained the ever-present prospect of improvement and upliftment. Pandora eventually succeeded in securing the lid of the fateful container. By then, however, its contents had been entirely dispersed. The myriad afflictions had disseminated globally, permeating every corner of the earth, and mortals universally began to comprehend the profound implications of tribulation. Yet they were simultaneously unearthing the profound essence of optimism, perseverance, and unwavering resolve, even amidst the most arduous circumstances. And that, some narrators suggest, marked the genesis of genuine human essence, imperfect and perpetually beset by challenges, but endowed with the fortitude to confront adversity with valor and an indomitable spirit of expectation. As for Pandora, she spent the remainder of her earthly days within that modest hamlet, diligently assisting her fellow villagers in navigating the transformed paradigms of their daily lives. The substantial heft of the enigmatic receptacle remained indelibly etched in her memory, as did the tactile sensation of the key's rotation within its mechanism. But she also never forgot the soft, reassuring tones of the entity named Hope, imparting the profound wisdom that even the most grievous misjudgments could ultimately engender profound significance. Sometimes, in the hushed hours of the evening, when daily tribulations became profoundly oppressive, individuals would frequently cast their minds back to the narrative of Pandora. They would remember that the inherent human trait of inquisitiveness, even when fraught with peril, constituted an intrinsic aspect of their very being. And they would remember that, irrespective of the apparent gloom enveloping their circumstances, the steadfast presence of hope endured, ever patient and unyieldingly persistent, perpetually anticipating the dawn of a new day. One might ponder the true nature of the contents originally confined within that fateful container. Could its unveiling have been a preordained event? Or did Pandora's intrinsic inquisitiveness genuinely precipitate an irreparable error that irrevocably altered the trajectory of global existence? Let us now journey retrospectively to an epoch when mortals found themselves trembling in the relentless grip of frigidity and subsisting on uncooked sustenance, when the sole illumination available once the sun had descended emanated from the celestial bodies of the moon and stars. This is the compelling account detailing the introduction of fire to the human race and the severe retribution exacted upon a particular deity for his benevolent actions. Prometheus was distinctly divergent from his divine counterparts. While the sovereign Zeus and his esteemed kin indulged in leisurely pursuits and grand strategizing atop the venerable Mount Olympus, Prometheus, conversely, found solace in traversing the terrestrial realm amidst humankind. He would assume the unassuming guise of a common wayfarer and frequent their nascent encampments, observing their daily existence. The spectacles he witnessed evoked a profound sense of melancholy within him. These human beings were intellectually astute and inherently compassionate, yet they were simultaneously afflicted by biting cold and arduous striving. As dusk descended, they congregated tightly within the confines of rudimentary caverns and makeshift abodes, endeavoring desperately to ward off the chill. They consumed unprocessed flora, and the flesh of animals they sporadically hunted proved fibrous and resistant to assimilation. Upon the onset of illness, they lacked the means to heat water or concoct soothing remedies. Crucially, a pervasive dread of nocturnal obscurity afflicted them. Lacking the illuminating embrace of flame, the hours of darkness were fraught with profound terror. As predatory beasts roamed freely and mortals struggled to discern even their own extremities, familial units would draw near, murmuring hushed words until the welcome oblivion of slumber ultimately enveloped them. Prometheus occasionally joined their gatherings, partaking of their unheeded provisions and attending to their recounted narratives. He witnessed maternal figures crooning soothing melodies to infants restless due to the pervasive chill. He observed paternal efforts to assuage familial anxieties as the mournful cries of wolves echoed from afar. He perceived with clarity the immense alleviation their existence would attain with the simple boon of fire. Naturally, the divine inhabitants of Olympus possessed fire in abundance. The sacred peak of Olympus perpetually exuded warmth and effulgence, illuminated by ceaseless, inextinguishable conflagrations. The gods could prepare intricate culinary creations, maintain a comfortable temperature within their expansive chambers, and continue their endeavors uninterrupted by darkness. So fundamental and ubiquitous was fire to their divine reality that its presence was seldom, if ever, consciously acknowledged. However, the formidable Zeus had unequivocally determined that the potent essence of fire was far too formidable for mortal possession. He would frequently assert, whenever the subject arose, that they are simply not prepared for such a formidable gift. He reasoned, bestow upon them the gift of fire, and they will undoubtedly perceive themselves as equals to the gods. Their veneration of us will cease, and they will inevitably evolve into a perilous force. Prometheus, however, harbored a profound divergence of opinion. Yet he exercised extreme prudence to avoid direct confrontation with the paramount deity. Opting for a more circumspect approach, he would pose a series of inquiries. Supposing they were to utilize this elemental power solely for the purposes of warmth and sustenance preparation? What if, furthermore, they pledged to wield it with utmost circumspection and accountability? Under no circumstances whatsoever, Zeus would invariably retort with absolute finality. Mankind is inherently inquisitive and prone to imprudence. Grant them fire, and inevitably, they will soon employ it in the fabrication of instruments of war, leading to mutual annihilation. Therefore, Prometheus, the sacred flame shall remain exclusively within the dominion of the gods. Prometheus consequently maintained his vigilant surveillance and patient anticipation, and each subsequent journey to the terrestrial sphere deepened his profound empathy for the human condition. He observed them cultivating sophisticated linguistic systems, artistic expressions, and melodious compositions. They were acquiring the skills of agriculture and constructing more robust domiciles. They were manifestly endowed with intellect and competence. The singular impediment to their further advancement was the absence of fire. A certain winter season proved exceptionally severe. Prometheus assumed the unassuming guise of an aged wanderer and journeyed to a modest settlement where households grappled fiercely for their very existence. The frigidity was so profound that even individuals swathed in protective animal hides succumbed to frostbite. Youngsters wailed inconsolably, their cries stemming from hunger, as the unforgiving, frozen earth rendered all foraging attempts futile. Prometheus dedicated a span of 3 days within that beleaguered village. Offering assistance wherever feasible, he employed his divine capabilities with discreet finesse, directing foraging expeditions towards elusive quarry and alleviating the suffering of ailing inhabitants to some measurable degree. But he remained incapable of resolving the fundamental predicament. In the absence of fire, these human beings were reduced to a bestial mode of existence, and a tragic proportion of them faced imminent demise before the winter's end. During his final nocturnal hours within the village, Prometheus reached a momentous resolution, one destined to irrevocably alter the course of history. He patiently bided his time until all villagers had succumbed to slumber, then stealthily departed the settlement and ascended once more to the celestial heights of Mount Olympus. Diverging from his customary path to his personal abode, he proceeded directly to the grand chamber where the perpetual divine flame blazed. The majestic fire presented an exquisite spectacle, a vibrant, animate conflagration that gracefully swayed and pulsated without ever diminishing. Its emanation was both comforting and luminous, its mere proximity instilling within Prometheus the profound sense of solace so sorely absent from human existence. He meticulously scanned his surroundings to confirm his solitude, before gingerly detaching a fragment of the ethereal blaze. This endeavor proved far from simple. Celestial fire possessed characteristics fundamentally distinct from mundane flame. It evinced an intrinsic volition, resisting any severance from its primordial origin. Prometheus was compelled to employ a uniquely crafted torch, fashioned from the resilient stalk of fennel, capable of containing the divine fire without succumbing to incineration. The entire procedure unfolded with painstaking slowness and exquisite delicacy, akin to the arduous task of netting a butterfly without marring its delicate wings. Ultimately, he succeeded in possessing a torch ablaze with the potent divine fire. Though diminished in scale compared to the colossal inferno on Mount Olympus, it was nonetheless authentic fire. destined to persist as long as it received sustenance. Prometheus, exercising utmost discretion, secreted the blazing torch within the folds of his garment and embarked on his return journey to the terrestrial plane. Upon his arrival, the village remained steeped in the tranquility of slumber. Prometheus proceeded to the communal heart of the encampment and meticulously constructed a modest fire pit using readily available stones. He carefully arranged a selection of desiccated timber and flammable tinder within the depression, before gently applying his divine torch to the awaiting combustibles. The nascent blaze ignited instantly, radiating a vivid luminosity and comforting warmth. Prometheus reclined slightly, observing the flickering spectacle for a brief interval, experiencing a profound sense of fulfillment hitherto unknown to him. This seemingly diminutive flame, he knew, held the power to utterly revolutionize the lives of these mortals. They would attain warmth. They would gain the capacity to prepare their sustenance. Their pervasive fear of nocturnal obscurity would be banished. He then thoughtfully placed the now redundant torch beside the burgeoning hearth and vanished into the pre-dawn gloom before any inhabitant stirred from their rest. With the advent of the ensuing morning, the villagers awoke to a spectacle of profound astonishment. A vibrant fire blazed steadily. Initially, a palpable trepidation prevented their close proximity to the unfamiliar phenomenon. Yet progressively, they congregated, drawn by the emanating warmth and captivated by the hypnotic undulations of the flames. The venerable matriarch of the settlement, a sagacious woman known as Lyra, was the inaugural individual to grasp the profound implications of this discovery. This, she declared with solemn reverence, is a divine endowment. It is incumbent upon us to nurture it with meticulous care and ensure its perpetual existence. The inhabitants of the village swiftly acquired the requisite skills for sustaining the flame and kindling subsidiary fires from its primordial source. This invaluable wisdom was then generously disseminated among adjacent communities, and ere long, the blessing of fire proliferated throughout the entire human realm. Mortals commenced the preparation of their sustenance, the heating of their domiciles, and the continuation of their labors beyond the twilight hours. They innovated novel implements and artisanal techniques, and their collective existence was rendered incalculably more facile. However, the omniscient Zeus did not fail to perceive this profound alteration. From his lofty vantage point on Mount Olympus, he discerned the nascent specks of luminosity dispersed across the terrestrial surface, marking the locations where human enclaves had mastered the art of fire-making. Initially, his reaction was one of detached inquisitiveness. Subsequently, a growing sense of suspicion began to fester. Ultimately, his disposition erupted into a tempest of unbridled wrath. Who dared to bestow the elemental power of fire upon these mortals? He thundered imperiously, convening all the Olympian deities in a peremptory summons. A profound silence descended upon the assembly. No deity ventured a response. Glances were exchanged amongst them, yet none dared to acknowledge their complicity in contravening Zeus's unequivocal decree. At last, with resolute bearing, Prometheus advanced from their midst. "It was I," he stated with unadorned candor. Zeus fixated his piercing gaze upon Prometheus for an extended, heavy moment. When his words finally emerged, they carried a perilous, hushed intensity. "You purloined the sacred flame from the dominion of the gods and gifted it to ephemeral mortals. You flagrantly disregarded a categorical injunction. You have perpetrated the most egregious transgression conceivable against the fundamental cosmic equilibrium. The mortals were suffering greatly, Prometheus articulated in response. They possess keen intellect and remarkable capabilities. It is their inherent right to wield the transformative power of fire. That determination was never yours to render, Zeus retorted with an unyielding tone. And now you shall inevitably endure the severe consequences of your brazen disobedience. The retribution Zeus meticulously conceived was precisely calibrated to mirror the gravity of the transgression. Given that Prometheus had audaciously purloined the sacred flame, he was destined to be perpetually afflicted by a torment intrinsically linked to fire itself. Zeus, in his supreme authority, decreed that Prometheus be immovably shackled to a colossal rock within the formidable Caucasus Mountains, where he would languish for the entirety of unending time. Yet this immutable confinement was not the most egregious aspect of his dreadful fate. With each passing dawn, an immense predatory eagle, a creature of formidable power, would descend upon the very rock where Prometheus lay bound. This avian executioner would mercilessly rend open Prometheus's chest cavity and voraciously consume his liver. Then, by virtue of Prometheus's divine immortality, his vital organ would regenerate completely overnight, ensuring that the colossal bird would return with horrifying punctuality the following day to reenact the excruciating ritual. This cycle of agony persisted for countless millennia. Every morning, Prometheus would awaken on his desolate crag, his body miraculously mended from the previous day's unspeakable torment, yet acutely aware that the eagle's grim arrival was imminent. Every evening, he would mercifully succumb to the overwhelming tide of pain and lose consciousness, only to reawaken the next morning, condemned to confront the same horrific ordeal anew. One might naturally assume that after a few fleeting decades, or perhaps even a handful of centuries, Prometheus would succumb to profound remorse for his audacious decision. However, the ancient narratives steadfastly assert that he never once harbored regret. Even amidst the most excruciating throes of his unending pain, he would cast his gaze downward towards the earth, witnessing the burgeoning lights of human civilization grow ever brighter and more multitudinous across the vast continents. He observed the erection of magnificent cities, the creation of breathtaking works of art, and the ceaseless dissemination of invaluable knowledge. Humanity had indeed utilized fire with an admirable sense of responsibility, precisely as Prometheus had so fervently believed they would. They had cultivated sophisticated agricultural practices, pioneered advancements in medicine, and engineered groundbreaking technologies. They had mastered the craft of fashioning objects of exquisite beauty, and had learned the profound importance of mutual aid and cooperation. Fire, in essence, had proven to be the indispensable catalyst that unlocked their latent potential. Citing. And witnessing that boundless potential so gloriously fulfilled rendered Prometheus' otherwise unbearable suffering a burden he could, against all odds, endure. Occasionally, on tranquil, cloudless evenings, mortals would gaze heavenward at the twinkling stars and reverently recall the epic saga of Prometheus. They would tend their own domestic fires with a heightened degree of vigilance and care, profoundly aware that an immortal being had paid an unspeakably terrible price to bestow upon them this invaluable gift. They would recount to their progeny the tale of the benevolent god who had prioritized their welfare above his own personal safety and comfort. And in this profound manner, Prometheus's monumental sacrifice became intrinsically woven into the very essence of fire itself. Every instance humans congregated around a warm hearth, every time they prepared a nourishing meal or ignited a guiding lamp, they were, in a sense, participating in a quiet yet powerful act of defiance against the oppressive notion that some entities are inherently entitled to comfort, while others are condemned to endless suffering. The venerable narrative recounts that eventually, after the passage of many thousands of years, Prometheus was finally liberated from his cruel chains. But that, indeed, is a story reserved for another evening's telling. Tonight, as you prepare to surrender to the embrace of sleep, perhaps you might find yourself appreciating the ambient warmth and the gentle light that surrounds you with a deeper sense of gratitude, knowing that, according to these ancient tales, these seemingly simple gifts were acquired at an immeasurable cost. Fire undeniably remains one of humanity's most potent and transformative instruments. However, it is simultaneously one of our most perilous. In serene moments such as these, we are afforded the opportunity to reflect deeply upon the profound responsibility that inherently accompanies such immense power, and the paramount importance of exercising our collective gifts judiciously and with profound compassion for all sentient beings. There exists an undeniable tranquility in the rhythmic progression of the seasons, does there not? The gradual, almost imperceptible transition of autumn giving way to the stark beauty of winter, and how spring invariably returns with its boundless promise of vibrant renewal. Tonight's narrative endeavors to elucidate the fundamental reason for the very existence of our seasons, and to explain why a youthful goddess named Persephone ultimately became the pivotal conduit, bridging the vibrant world of the living with the enigmatic realm of the departed. Persephone was the cherished offspring of Demeter, the revered goddess of bountiful harvests and all things verdant and growing. Should you ever behold a vast field of golden wheat undulating gracefully in the gentle summer breeze, or observe the delicate blossoming of flowers within a meticulously tended garden, you have, in essence, borne witness to the tireless efforts of Demeter. She bore the immense responsibility for every single organism that sprouted from the fertile earth, ranging from the most diminutive wildflower to the most majestic and ancient oak tree. Persephone, in turn, inherited her divine mother's profound adoration for all botanical life. However, she manifested this affection in a distinctly unique manner. While Demeter operated on an expansive cosmic scale, bestowing fertility upon entire sprawling regions, Persephone exhibited a marked preference for engaging directly with individual plants and delicate flowers. She would dedicate countless hours within sun-drenched meadows, gently coaxing shy violets to unfurl their petals and diligently assisting nascent saplings in locating the most propitious locations for their burgeoning root systems. She was considered youthful by the enduring standards of the goddesses, imbued with a vibrant enthusiasm that springs from perceiving the world as an endless tapestry of boundless possibilities. Each morning, she would awaken brimming with eagerness regarding the fresh discoveries that the new day might unveil. Would she stumble upon an entirely novel species of flower, hitherto unknown? Would she successfully guide a struggling plant towards the life-giving embrace of sunlight? Would she forge new bonds of friendship with the graceful deer and fleet-footed rabbits that inhabited the very meadows she so carefully nurtured? Demeter adored her beloved daughter beyond measure, yet she was also fiercely protective of her. The vast world, even for powerful goddesses, could be fraught with inherent dangers, and Persephone's inherently trusting and guileless nature was a constant source of profound maternal worry for Demeter. Consequently, she preferred to keep Persephone in close proximity, engaged in her work within the secure, familiar meadows situated near their divine dwelling. "There are so many wonders to explore right here within our domain," Demeter would gently assert whenever Persephone voiced an interest in venturing further afield. Why embark upon a quest for distant adventures when an abundance of exquisite flowers right here are in dire need of your tender attention? Persephone comprehended her mother's well-intentioned concerns, yet she simultaneously experienced an undeniable sense of restlessness. She genuinely cherished her work, but an insatiable longing to witness more of the sprawling world beckoned to her. She yearned to encounter other gods and goddesses, to acquire knowledge about diverse ways of existence, and to uncover the mysteries that lay beyond the established boundaries of her protective mother's divine dominion. One crisp spring morning, Persephone was diligently engaged in her work within a particularly enchanting meadow, which was abundantly adorned with narcissus flowers. These specific blossoms possessed a unique quality. They exuded a sweet, almost intoxicating fragrance that could, if inhaled too deeply, induce a blissful forgetfulness of one's earthly troubles. Persephone exercised caution around them, but she was captivated by their inherent beauty and the ethereal way they seemed to radiate a soft glow in the early morning light. She was kneeling gracefully beside a dense cluster of narcissus, gently encouraging them to bloom with even greater splendor, when her gaze suddenly alighted upon something truly peculiar. A single flower, noticeably larger and far more resplendent than any of the others, was flourishing at the very edge of the meadow, in a location where she was absolutely certain no flower had ever grown before. The solitary blossom was undeniably extraordinary. Its delicate petals were as pristine white as freshly fallen snow, yet they appeared to encapsulate all the vibrant hues of the rainbow, subtly shifting and changing their coloration as the ambient light caressed them. Its perfume was even more profoundly intoxicating than that of the surrounding narcissuses, carrying ethereal hints of golden honey and the refreshing essence of summer rain. Persephone approached the enigmatic flower with a cautious reverence. There was an inexplicable quality about it that felt distinctly different from the myriad plants she typically cultivated. It did not feel like a creation of her mother, nor did it possess the organic spontaneity of something that had grown naturally from the soil. Instead, it conveyed a sense of being meticulously planned, deliberately placed, as if someone had specifically positioned it there for her to discover. She knelt beside the mesmerizing flower and cautiously extended her hand to caress its petals. They felt remarkably soft and warm to her touch. And the very instant her fingers made contact, the flower began to radiate an even more brilliant luminosity. The ground immediately surrounding it seemed to pulse with an unseen, potent energy. It was at this precise moment that the earth itself began to open. This phenomenon did not occur with the violent seismic force of an earthquake. Rather, the solid ground simply parted with an almost fluid grace, like water gently dividing, creating a vast, gaping aperture that descended into an unfathomable darkness. From within this newly formed chasm emerged a magnificent chariot, drawn by four formidable black horses, whose coats were so profoundly dark they appeared to absorb all ambient light. The charioteer was a figure of immense stature and imposing presence, clad in robes that seemed to be woven from the very fabric of shadow itself. This was Hades, the formidable god of the underworld, the undisputed sovereign ruler of the dead. He rarely ventured forth from his subterranean kingdom, but when he did, it was invariably for matters of grave importance. On this particular day, his pressing business concerned Persephone. He had been observing her intently for many months, meticulously noting how she interacted with the plants and flowers, and how she effortlessly brought forth life and vibrant beauty wherever her presence graced the land. The underworld, by contrast, was a perpetually gray, desolate, and lifeless domain, and Hades was consumed by a profound sense of loneliness. He had convinced himself that Persephone's radiant presence would infuse his bleak realm with a much-needed measure of warmth and vitality. What he had conspicuously failed to consider, however, was whether Persephone herself would harbor any desire to accompany him. "You are compelled to come with me," Hades declared, his deep voice resonating with an uncanny echo in the open air. "The underworld is in desperate need of your essence. I, myself, am in need of you." Persephone gracefully rose to her feet, meticulously brushing specks of dirt from her hands. "I am indeed honored by your unexpected invitation," she responded with remarkable politeness, her voice steady. "However, I have pressing work that requires my attention here. Perhaps we could arrange a visit at some future time, when my schedule is not quite so demanding." Hades appeared genuinely bewildered by her response. He was accustomed to being obeyed without the slightest hint of question or demur. The deceased inhabitants of his realm certainly did not engage in arguments with him, and the few living mortals who ever chanced upon him were typically far too terrified to do anything but meekly comply with his every command. "You fundamentally misunderstand the situation," he stated, his voice now imbued with an undeniable edge of finality. "This is not presented as a mere request. You are coming with me, and you are coming now." Before Persephone could formulate any further response, Hades swiftly reached out and with an almost effortless motion lifted her into his dark chariot. The four black horses immediately surged forward, beginning their descent, carrying the chariot precipitously down through the gaping aperture in the earth. Persephone cried out for her mother, her voice filled with desperate urgency, but they were already too far deep underground for her plaintive plea to carry to the surface. The arduous journey to the underworld was an experience utterly unlike anything Persephone had ever encountered or could have possibly imagined. They traversed through labyrinthine caverns and winding tunnels, past subterranean rivers that flowed with silent dark waters, and through vast, echoing, empty spaces that stretched into the gloom. The deeper they plunged, the more profound and absolute the silence became, until the only discernible sounds were the rhythmic thud of the horses' hooves and the low rumble of the chariot's wheels rolling over the unyielding stone. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, they arrived at Hades' formidable palace. It possessed a grandeur that was unique in its own austere way, meticulously carved from obsidian dark stone and illuminated by torches that burned with an eerie, cold blue flame. Every element within was arranged with perfect precision and maintained in a state of spotless cleanliness. Yet the entire edifice was chillingly quiet and utterly devoid of any discernible spark of life. The sovereign of the underworld, Hades, extended a greeting to Persephone, assisting her descent from the grand chariot that had conveyed them. He formally welcomed her to what he intended to be her permanent dwelling within his subterranean domain. Persephone's gaze swept across the regal, yet starkly beautiful and unfeeling architecture of the palace. She acknowledged its grandeur with a diplomatic remark, stating, "It is undeniably impressive." However, she promptly articulated her inability to remain, citing profound concern for her mother's potential distress and her own vital obligations in the vibrant world above. Hades then escorted her to a magnificently appointed chamber, equipped with every conceivable comfort and luxury. The centerpiece was a lavish bed, crafted from gleaming silver and exquisite ivory, adorned with sumptuously soft silk blankets. Adjacent to this, extensive bookshelves groaned under the weight of countless rare and ancient volumes, promising intellectual solace. The room also boasted windows offering panoramic vistas of meticulously cultivated subterranean gardens, and a capacious wardrobe brimming with an array of garments perfectly befitting a monarch. "Every detail has been meticulously arranged for your arrival," Hades declared, conveying his assurance that you shall find utmost comfort within these walls. Yet, what the formidable ruler of the chthonic realm had entirely failed to anticipate was the profound aversion Persephone would develop for her subterranean confinement. Her existence had always been characterized by the golden warmth of sunshine, the invigorating freshness of the air, the melodious chorus of avian life, and the gentle whisper of rustling foliage. While the underworld possessed a unique, somber splendor, it was simultaneously suffocatingly oppressive and eerily devoid of natural sounds. More pressing than her personal discomfort, however, was her gnawing anxiety for her mother. Demeter, the venerable goddess of agriculture, would undoubtedly be driven to a state of utter frenzy upon discovering her daughter's inexplicable disappearance. Persephone foresaw accurately that Demeter would embark upon a relentless, exhaustive search, inevitably forsaking her vital divine responsibilities in her desperate quest to locate her beloved offspring. This grim premonition, indeed, proved to be an accurate prophecy of events. Upon Demeter's return to her pastoral abode, she discovered the verdant meadow unsettlingly vacant. The sole tangible clue hinting at an extraordinary occurrence was the peculiar narcissus flower, a silent testament to the recent upheaval. An immediate and profound sense of unease settled upon her, confirming that a grave misfortune had transpired. Driven by an escalating panic, she scoured every lush meadow, every dense forest, and every towering mountain peak, her voice echoing with the desperate, repeated cries of Persephone's name until it became irrevocably hoarse from exertion. Concurrently with the intensification of Demeter's anguish, her divine capacity to sustain the earth's inherent fertility began to perceptibly wane. Agricultural yields commenced a precipitous decline, with essential crops failing to mature. Arboreal life ceased its fruit-bearing cycles. Delicate blossoms withered prematurely and perished. The very soil beneath, once teeming with generative power, appeared to relinquish its fundamental ability to nurture and support any form of existence. Concurrently, within the dim confines of the underworld, Persephone steadfastly abstained from all sustenance. This refusal was partly attributable to her profound emotional distress, which severely diminished her natural appetite. However, her primary motivation stemmed from a widely known decree. Consuming any foodstuff within the infernal realm would irrevocably tether her to that domain for eternity. Her persistent hope was that by maintaining this strict fast, she might eventually secure her liberation and return to her cherished home. Hades, for his part, exhausted every conceivable stratagem to alleviate her discomfort and win her affection. He presented her with opulent gifts of shimmering precious gems and invaluable ancient tomes. He personally guided her through the most breathtaking and awe-inspiring vistas of his vast, shadowy kingdom. He regaled her with intricate narratives detailing the ancient history of the underworld and elucidated the critical cosmic work he performed in upholding the delicate equilibrium between existence and demise. Nevertheless, none of these overtures proved effective. Persephone maintained a facade of courteousness, yet her demeanor remained unequivocally aloof, betraying a palpable yearning for her sunlit home and her grieving mother. Following several protracted weeks of this intractable stalemate, Zeus, the supreme ruler of Olympus, was ultimately compelled to intercede. The ecological predicament on Earth had escalated to a truly critical juncture. Mortals were succumbing to widespread famine as agricultural yields had completely ceased. Fauna were perishing en masse due to the failure of flora to propagate vital seeds. It became terrifyingly evident that if immediate action was not taken, the very fabric of all terrestrial life faced imminent and irreversible annihilation. In response to this dire emergency, Zeus dispatched Hermes, the swift-footed herald of the gods, to the chthonic realm with a mandate to negotiate with Hades. The divine message conveyed was unambiguous and stark. Release Persephone and return her to her distraught mother, or confront the cataclysmic repercussions of permitting all organic existence on Earth to utterly vanish. Hades found himself ensnared in an exceptionally challenging predicament. While he harbored a profound and genuine affection for Persephone, he was simultaneously acutely aware that his unilateral actions were precipitating immense suffering across the mortal plane. Consequently, he acquiesced to her release, but stipulated a singular, non-negotiable condition: she would be obligated to reside within the underworld alongside him for a specified portion of every year. The accord ultimately forged between the deities delineated the following arrangement. Persephone was to dedicate 6 months of each annual cycle to her role as Hades' queen within the underworld, and the subsequent 6 months were to be spent in the vibrant upper world, reunited with her mother. During the period of her subterranean residence, Demeter would be consumed by profound grief over her daughter's absence, causing the earth to become frigid and infertile. Conversely, during Persephone's tenure above ground, Demeter would exult in her daughter's return, prompting the earth to burst forth with abundant life and unparalleled fertility. However, an unforeseen complication emerged. Moments before Hermes materialized to escort her homeward, Persephone had, at last, consumed a morsel of food. Her extended confinement within the shadowy realm had incrementally eroded her steadfast resolve, leading her to ingest precisely 6 crimson pomegranate seeds. In accordance with the immutable statutes governing the underworld, this act undeniably bound her to spend an equivalent 6 months of every year within Hades' dominion. Certain interpretations of this ancient narrative posit that Persephone's consumption of the seeds was an accidental oversight, an unintentional breach of the binding rule. Yet other accounts subtly insinuate a more deliberate action, hinting at a nuanced shift in her perspective. Following her prolonged immersion in the underworld, she had reportedly commenced to grasp the profound significance of Hades's cosmic responsibilities and the vital function he fulfilled. Furthermore, she had ostensibly begun to cultivate a nascent sense of affection for the solitary deity who had, albeit forcibly, brought her to his realm. Irrespective of her precise motivations, the outcome remained unequivocally consistent. Persephone ascended to the position of Queen of the Underworld for 1/2 of every year. For the remaining half, she faithfully returned to assist her mother in diligently preserving the earth's essential fertility. And thus, according to the venerable lore of the ancient Greeks, this profound mythological event serves as the foundational explanation for the cyclical procession of the seasons. When Persephone is sequestered within the underworld, the mortal realm experiences the dormant chill of winter, during which all burgeoning life rests in a state of suspended animation, awaiting her eventual reappearance. Conversely, upon her triumphant return to the terrestrial surface, the world is ushered into the vibrant embrace of spring, awakening to a glorious resurgence of new life and boundless potential. This profound narrative intimates that, at times, the most pivotal transformations within human existence do not originate from our autonomous decisions, but rather from the acquired wisdom of adapting gracefully to circumstances that were entirely beyond our selection. Persephone, through her unique ordeal, ultimately discovered an ingenious method to simultaneously uphold her filial obligation to her mother and embrace her newfound responsibility as Queen of the Underworld, thereby forging a delicate yet robust equilibrium that permitted both cosmic realms to flourish harmoniously. Many celebrated narratives chronicle the exploits of valiant heroes who achieved triumph through sheer physical might or exceptional intellectual cunning. This particular account, however, focuses on a protagonist whose near victory was almost entirely orchestrated by the transcendent power of music, and it poignantly illustrates how even the most deeply ingrained human impulses can tragically unravel the most courageous and heroic endeavors. Orpheus, a figure of legendary renown, was the illustrious progeny of Apollo, the resplendent deity of music, poetry, and light, and one of the revered 9 muses, those divine inspirers of all artistic and literary pursuits. Given such an exalted lineage, it was hardly astonishing that Orpheus entered the world endowed with an extraordinary, innate aptitude for musical expression. Nevertheless, the profound depth and unparalleled scope of his talent transcended even the loftiest expectations, defying what might typically be anticipated from the offspring of a god. Whenever Orpheus caressed the strings of his magnificent lyre, the natural world responded in miraculous ways. Blossoms would spontaneously unfurl, defying the constraints of their designated seasons. Towering trees would miraculously dislodge their roots, ambulating closer to more fully absorb the ethereal strains of his melodies. Mighty rivers, abandoning their established channels, would alter their courses to meander nearer to the location of his performance. Even the most ferocious of wild beasts would be rendered docile and placid. Formidable lions would recline serenely beside defenseless lambs, and predatory hawks would perch in tranquil coexistence beside timid mice. Yet, the most astonishing attribute of Orpheus's unparalleled musical prowess lay in its profound and transformative impact upon human beings. As his celestial notes resonated, long-standing adversaries would miraculously relinquish their bitter disputes and embrace in newfound amity. Individuals burdened by sorrow would discover an unexpected solace and alleviation of their grief. Those consumed by wrath would experience an instantaneous infusion of profound tranquility. And without exception, every single person privileged to hear his enchanting compositions would vividly recall the sublime sensation of unadulterated, genuine happiness. Orpheus, keenly aware of the immense power he wielded, exercised his extraordinary gift with profound responsibility and benevolence. He journeyed tirelessly from one locale to another, dedicating his performances to individuals in dire need of spiritual healing or emotional solace. He frequently graced hospitals, offering his melodic ministrations to the ailing. He performed at matrimonial ceremonies, bestowing blessings upon nascent unions, and he provided profound comfort to those ensnared in the depths of mourning. His transcendent music served as a potent balm, akin to a restorative medicine for the afflicted human soul. It was on a particular day, as he performed his enchanting melodies within a verdant meadow adjacent to a quaint village, that Orpheus encountered a captivating young woman named Eurydice. She was, in essence, a wood nymph, belonging to the ethereal company of nature spirits, who gracefully inhabited the sylvan forests and sun-dappled clearings. Eurydice possessed an undeniable physical beauty, yet it was her uniquely profound manner of listening to his music that most powerfully drew Orpheus to her. In stark contrast to the typical audience, who, upon hearing Orpheus's divine strains, would often drift into a state of dreamy reverie, lost in the mesmerizing enchantment of his performance, Eurydice absorbed every sound with unwavering and complete attention, her eyes sparkling with intense focus. She appeared to grasp not merely the intricate melodic lines, but also the profound emotional depth and intrinsic meaning embedded within each individual note. Following the conclusion of his mesmerizing performance, Eurydice gracefully approached him. She articulated her profound observation, stating, "Your music possesses the remarkable ability to convey intricate narratives." She further elaborated, "In that final composition, I could distinctly perceive and comprehend entire worlds unfolding." Orpheus was profoundly delighted to encounter an individual who genuinely apprehended the nuanced depths of his artistic expression. They commenced a conversation that swiftly revealed a multitude of shared affinities. Both harbored an ardent adoration for the natural world. Both were deeply committed to the noble pursuit of bestowing beauty and solace upon their fellow beings. And, crucially, both firmly believed that the sublime arts of music and poetry served as potent instruments for the amelioration and betterment of the world. Their affection blossomed organically and incrementally as they devoted countless protracted afternoons to each other's company amidst the tranquil meadows and ancient forests. Orpheus would serenely strum his lyre, weaving enchanting melodies, while Eurydice would respond with a dance so exquisitely graceful that her movements appeared to be a visible manifestation of the music itself. She, in turn, would recount enchanting tales of the forest's most secluded and mystical enclaves, which he would then masterfully transmute into lyrical compositions. Their matrimonial ceremony proved to be one of the most breathtaking and magnificent celebrations ever witnessed. The sacred rites transpired within a hallowed grove where, defying the natural cycle of the seasons, every single tree was miraculously in full bloom, despite it being the season of autumn. The esteemed company of all the Olympian gods and goddesses graced the occasion, alongside a joyous assembly of nymphs, satyrs, and various denizens of the woodland. Orpheus's music on this auspicious day evoked such profound emotion that it moved every attendee to shed tears of pure felicity, and Eurydice's dance was executed with such ethereal grace that she appeared to effortlessly float above the ground. For an entire annual cycle, they coexisted in a state of unblemished felicity. Orpheus's already sublime music attained even greater heights of beauty and emotional resonance, profoundly inspired by his deep and abiding love for Eurydice. She, in turn, offered invaluable insights, guiding him in refining his compositions to be even more tender and therapeutically potent. Collaboratively, they journeyed to regions where humanity was suffering, extending solace and instilling hope through the combined artistry of music and dance. However, their idyllic happiness, like all mortal joys, proved lamentably ephemeral and delicate. On a serene summer afternoon, Eurydice was leisurely traversing a sun-drenched meadow, while Orpheus was engrossed in practicing a nascent musical composition. She was meticulously gathering wildflowers, intending to fashion them into a verdant crown for his hair, treading with utmost care through the verdant, tall grass. Her concentration was so utterly absorbed in locating the most pristine blossoms that she remained tragically oblivious to the imminent peril until it was irreversibly upon her. A serpent, abruptly startled by her unsuspecting footsteps, lashed out instinctively in an act of self-preservation. Its venomous fangs brutally penetrated her ankle, swiftly injecting a potent toxin that coursed through her circulatory system within a mere few minutes. By the time Orpheus, alerted by her sudden piercing cry, rushed frantically to her side, she was already in the final throes of death. Orpheus cradled her in his embrace as her vitality slowly waned. He made a desperate attempt to play his lyre, fervently hoping that his melodies might miraculously restore her. Yet, for the very first time in his illustrious career, his music felt utterly devoid of potency. No composition, however exquisite, possessed the power to resurrect the departed. No harmonious arrangement could possibly negate the irreversible actions that had transpired. Eurydice's ultimate utterance was a poignant plea. Don't stop playing. The world needs your music. In the aftermath of Eurydice's demise, Orpheus plunged into an abyss of profound melancholia. He found himself unable to consume food, to attain slumber, or to derive any vestige of happiness from existence. His musical expressions, once sources of delight and comfort, transformed into mournful and haunting strains, serving as a direct reflection of his immense grief. When he performed now, listeners would invariably shed tears rather than experience solace. The very trees that had previously swayed in joyous rhythm to his enchanting tunes now stood utterly motionless, as if they too were immersed in a shared lamentation. For numerous months, Orpheus traversed the globe, ceaselessly performing laments of profound absence and yearning. Nothing seemed capable of alleviating his deep distress. Well-intentioned companions endeavored to persuade him that he must reconcile with Eurydice's passing and resume the course of his life. However, Orpheus found himself utterly incapable of relinquishing his attachment. His affection for her was boundless, and he simply could not envision a future devoid of her cherished presence. Ultimately, he formulated an audacious resolution, one that no mortal had ever conceived before. He would journey to the underworld and implore Hades to return Eurydice to him. Everyone around him vehemently asserted that such an undertaking was an absolute impossibility. The deceased, they insisted, were irrevocably barred from re-entering the realm of the living. This, they declared, constituted the most fundamental and unalterable law of existence. Death was an immutable state, and even the most powerful deities could not contravene it. Nevertheless, Orpheus possessed a singular advantage, an unparalleled gift that no other individual could claim: his extraordinary musical talent. If any being could possibly sway Hades into making an unprecedented exception, it would undoubtedly be an individual capable of profoundly touching the very core of the god of the dead. Orpheus embarked on his journey to the entrance of the underworld, a shadowy cavern vigilantly overseen by Cerberus, the formidable tri-headed canine. Cerberus's designated role was to obstruct the ingress of mortals into the spectral domain. However, the instant Orpheus commenced playing his lyre, even this fearsome beast was utterly captivated. All three of its heads gradually succumbed to slumber, allowing Orpheus to proceed unhindered and unmolested. The passage through the netherworld proved to be both protracted and profoundly uncanny. Orpheus maintained his melodious performance on his lyre as he walked, and his music exerted remarkable effects upon the spectral inhabitants of the dead. Souls that had long been tormented by the weight of their transgressions discovered an unprecedented tranquility for the first time since their demise. The eternal retributions inflicted upon the wicked were momentarily suspended as they absorbed the ethereal beauty of his songs. Finally, Orpheus arrived at the majestic dwelling of Hades and Persephone. The regal couple was seated upon their ornate thrones, engrossed in accounts from their attendants concerning the strange agitation emanating throughout their realm. When Orpheus entered, still delivering his melodious performance on his lyre, they both fell into an immediate and profound silence. Orpheus then delivered an unparalleled musical rendition, the most exquisitely beautiful of his entire life. He performed compositions that explored the profound themes of affection and bereavement, the inherent splendor of existence, and the acute anguish of parting. He wove melodies that encapsulated the very essence of nascent spring dawns and languid summer dusks, the entire spectrum of human emotion from mirth to sorrow, and the profound dichotomy of optimism and desolation. As he played, something truly extraordinary and previously unheard of transpired. Hades, the austere deity of the departed, renowned for his stoicism and never before known to display emotion, began to shed tears. Persephone, who intimately understood the pain of being forcibly separated from cherished individuals, wept openly and unreservedly. Throughout the entirety of the underworld, the spirits of the dead paused in their perpetual routines to absorb the music that so poignantly rekindled memories of what they had irrevocably lost. When Orpheus concluded his performance, he knelt before the throne and articulated his fervent plea. "Please," he implored, "restore my wife to me. I find myself unable to endure existence without her, and the world is undeniably darker in her absence." Hades and Persephone exchanged a long, silent glance. What Orpheus was requesting had, in the annals of time, never been done before. The natural order of things unequivocally dictated that the deceased must perpetually reside in their state of death, but they had been profoundly stirred by his transcendent music, and they fully comprehended the vast extent of his unwavering devotion. After a protracted period of quietude, Hades finally articulated his response. "I will accede to your petition," he declared, "but with one singular critical stipulation. Eurydice will trail behind you as you exit the underworld, but you must not, under any circumstances, glance back at her until both of you have fully emerged into the surface world. If you turn around even once before you're both bathed in the sunlight, she will be permanently forfeited to you forever." Orpheus's immediate and unhesitating assent was given. The condition to him seemed remarkably straightforward and easily achievable. His intention was to precede her, his lyre providing a constant, melodious beacon to navigate their secure passage through the subterranean conduits and labyrinthine pathways of the underworld. He firmly believed that by maintaining an unwavering gaze forward and an unswerving concentration on their objective, a favorable outcome was absolutely assured. The commencement of their perilous expedition proceeded auspiciously. Orpheus serenaded their transit through the dim corridors with soft, fortifying melodies. Behind him, he distinctly perceived Eurydice's faint, recognizable footfalls trailing him. This auditory confirmation solidified his conviction that she was indeed present, faithfully accompanying him on their triumphant return to the realm of the vibrant. However, as their progress continued, insidious uncertainties began to subtly infiltrate Orpheus's consciousness. He noted the exceedingly faint nature of the footsteps behind him, prompting unsettling questions. Was he merely conjuring the sounds? Had Hades perhaps perpetrated a cruel deception, leaving no one to follow him at all? Could Eurydice have succumbed to fatigue, causing her to lag significantly behind? These misgivings intensified proportionally with their proximity to the surface. Orpheus felt an overwhelming compulsion to pivot and verify Eurydice's continued presence. Yet he rigorously compelled himself to maintain his forward gaze. The terms of the covenant remained unequivocally precise. No retrospective glance until both had emerged into the full radiance of the sun. Ultimately, following what seemed an interminable duration, Orpheus discerned an illumination in the distance. It was genuine solar radiance, distinct from the frigid inferno of the netherworld. His pace quickened, propelled by an ardent desire to attain the surface and joyfully reunite with his consort. The luminescence intensified progressively until he finally emerged from the cavern into the genial warmth of the afternoon sun. He had re-entered the realm of the living. His monumental endeavor was accomplished. He had successfully swayed Hades to liberate Eurydice, and their joint passage through the underworld had been triumphant. The sole remaining act was to pivot and enfold his wife in a long-awaited embrace. Yet, the instant Orpheus pivoted, his gaze fell upon Eurydice, still lingering within the cavern's gloom, mere paces from the sun's embrace. She extended a hand towards him, a faint smile gracing her features, but had not fully traversed the boundary into the terrestrial sphere. The precise moment their gazes intersected, her ethereal form commenced its dissolution. Her final look conveyed profound affection and comprehension, yet it was also tinged with an ineffable sorrow. She had been agonizingly close to regaining animation, only to be inexorably drawn back into the dominion of the deceased. "Goodbye, my love," she whispered, her voice a mere murmur as she vanished. Her ultimate injunction was a poignant reminder: don't forget to play music for the world. Orpheus immediately attempted to pursue her back into the netherworld, but his violation of the stipulated condition had rendered the portal impenetrable to him. He frantically strummed his lyre, fervently hoping to once more enchant the sentinels and gain passage, yet his efforts proved entirely ineffectual. His singular opportunity had been squandered, and that fleeting instant of hesitation, that moment of profound doubt, had exacted an irreparable toll, costing him everything. For the remainder of his existence, Orpheus dedicated himself to creating melodies that were simultaneously exquisitely beautiful and profoundly sorrowful. His compositions bore the immense burden of his personal bereavement, yet they also preserved the cherished recollection of an ideal affection. Those who had the privilege of hearing his performances would grasp the intrinsic truth that love and loss constitute indivisible facets of the human condition, inextricably linked. The narrative of Orpheus and Eurydice serves as a potent admonition that even the most valiant endeavors are susceptible to being nullified by quintessentially human instances of apprehension and uncertainty. Concurrently, it elucidates how profound affection, even when culminating in sorrow, possesses the capacity to engender enduring beauty that transcends suffering. Orpheus's musical legacy persisted in offering solace and invigoration to humanity long after his demise, thereby demonstrating that love holds the power to transmute even the most profound grief into an element that profoundly enriches global existence. Occasionally, the most exquisite aspirations inherently harbor the genesis of their own undoing. This ensuing chronicle recounts a paternal devotion, a filial yearning for achievement, and the perilous demarcation separating marvel from catastrophe. Daedalus was universally recognized as the preeminent artisan throughout the entire Hellenic world. His prodigious talent allowed him to construct virtually anything imaginable, edifices of worship that appeared to aspire towards the heavens, sculptures imbued with such verisimilitude they seemed to draw breath, and intricate automata capable of autonomous movement. Monarchs and aristocrats from every corner of the Mediterranean region frequently summoned him when their architectural or mechanical requirements demanded creations beyond the capabilities of any other craftsman. Nevertheless, Daedalus possessed an overweening sense of self-importance, a trait that precipitated decisions irrevocably altering the trajectory of his existence. He had, in a paroxysm of envy, committed the egregious act of slaying his own nephew, driven by the apprehension that the youth's nascent genius might one day overshadow his acclaimed mastery. As a punitive consequence for this heinous transgression, Daedalus suffered banishment from Athens, compelled to seek employment in remote territories. His peregrinations ultimately led him to Crete, where he secured patronage under King Minos. The monarch entrusted him with the formidable task of constructing a labyrinth, an intricate rectilinear puzzle of such bewildering complexity that escape was rendered utterly impossible for any who ventured within. This monumental edifice was conceived to confine the Minotaur, a chimerical being of dual human and bovine form, and it stood as Daedalus's crowning achievement in architectural ingenuity. The labyrinth's design was executed with such consummate precision that it flawlessly fulfilled its intended function. The Minotaur was effectively incarcerated, thereby prevented from absconding and perpetrating acts of terror upon the Cretan populace. Ironically, Daedalus had crafted the maze with excessive efficacy. Consequently, when King Minos resolved to safeguard the labyrinth's arcane mysteries from public knowledge, he incarcerated Daedalus and his youthful son, Icarus, within the very intricate structure they had brought into being. The labyrinth offered no semblance of a hospitable detention facility. Its confines were characterized by pervasive dampness and chill, punctuated by constricted pathways that appeared to stretch into infinity. Devoid of fenestrations, it afforded neither invigorating ventilation nor any glimpse of the external realm. Daedalus and Icarus sustained themselves on provisions periodically lowered from above, dedicating their days to traversing the interminable corridors in a fruitless quest for egress. Icarus, still in the bloom of youth, approximated 15 or 16 years of age, found the strictures of their incarceration considerably more arduous than his father. Having matured in an environment of unbridled liberty, he was habituated to the joys of unrestricted movement, play, and discovery. The labyrinth, to his youthful perception, was akin to a sepulchre, and he frequently succumbed to profound despondency at the prospect of never again beholding the solar orb. Daedalus, however, dedicated his intellect to profound contemplation. Innately predisposed to ingenious solutions, he steadfastly rejected the notion of insurmountable adversity. He scrutinized each individual block of masonry within the labyrinth, seeking any structural vulnerability or design flaw in its formidable construction. He diligently monitored the sentinels delivering provisions, meticulously cataloging their predictable patterns and customary practices. With relentless focus, he surveyed every conceivable egress point. The labyrinth was an architectural masterpiece of impregnable design, defying any direct breach. The vigilance of the custodians rendered any attempt at physical subjugation futile. The towering ramparts presented an insurmountable vertical challenge. Yet, a different phenomenon captured his discerning gaze. Avian creatures navigated the skies with unhindered liberty, traversing the aerial expanse at their own volition. Their dominion over the air rendered the terrestrial confines of the maze utterly irrelevant, because their mode of transit represented a fundamentally divergent approach to the dilemma of confinement. This singular observation sparked a revelatory concept within Daedalus's resourceful mind. He commenced the painstaking procurement of plumage from the feathered inhabitants that established their eyries within the elevated sections of the intricate structure. It was a laborious endeavor, involving the meticulous gleaning of sparse quills over extended periods, but with persistent diligence, he amassed a sufficient quantity to embark upon his ambitious undertaking. He also salvaged the congealed paraffin from the illuminating tapers provided by their captors and meticulously unraveled fibers from his personal garments. Operating clandestinely, under the cloak of utmost discretion, Daedalus initiated the fabrication of aerial appendages. The wings were a veritable triumph of innovative design and structural ingenuity. Daedalus systematically categorized and positioned the feathers according to their graduated dimensions, with the most substantial plumes providing the foundational skeletal structure, and the more delicate feathers artfully infilling the interstitial spaces. He secured them firmly with interwoven filaments and hermetically sealed the junctures with molten wax. The culmination of his efforts yielded a set of pinions possessing both robust tensile strength and remarkable pliability, ingeniously conceived to harness aerodynamic forces, thereby elevating a mortal physique into the boundless heavens. Icarus observed his paternal figure's painstaking labor with an escalating sense of exhilaration. The very concept of human flight ignited a profound thrill, surpassing any fantasy he had previously entertained. He contributed to the procurement of necessary components and lent aid to the intricate assembly process. But predominantly, his youthful mind was consumed by vivid imaginings of the sensation of ascending effortlessly into the celestial expanse, mimicking the graceful trajectory of an avian creature. Upon the successful completion of the initial set of aerial apparatus, Daedalus affixed them securely to his own scapulae and subjected them to a meticulous and cautious trial. He commenced with tentative, brief leaps, then progressively advanced to more sustained aerial trajectories. The crafted wings performed flawlessly, providing ample lift to bear his mass and affording him precise directional command. Heartened by this triumphant demonstration, Daedalus fashioned a subsequent set of wings specifically for his son, Icarus. These were proportionately reduced in size and mass, meticulously tailored to the more youthful physique of the boy. With both pairs of ingenious contraptions fully prepared, Daedalus recognized the opportune moment had arrived to execute their audacious bid for freedom. However, prior to their fateful ascent, he deemed it imperative to impart crucial directives to his progeny. "Heed my words with utmost attention, Icarus," Daedalus intoned, his voice laden with gravity and paternal apprehension. "While these engineered marvels promise to transport us to liberation, they simultaneously harbor inherent perils. The very adhesive binding their components, a refined wax, possesses a fragile constitution. Should your trajectory descend excessively, the pervasive humidity emanating from the ocean's surface will saturate the plumage, rendering them ponderous and unwieldy. Conversely, an ascent to an extreme altitude will expose the wax to the sun's intense caloric radiation, causing it to liquefy and precipitating the disintegration of the wings." Icarus offered a perfunctory nod, yet his auditory focus remained significantly diminished. His youthful exuberance regarding the imminent experience of flight overshadowed his capacity to absorb and internalize admonitions concerning potential calamities. "Maintain approximate position relative to my flight path," Daedalus pressed on. "Replicate my aerial trajectory with absolute precision. Refrain from any ostentatious displays or exploratory aerial acrobatics. Simply maintain a consistent and prudent flight, and our secure arrival will be assured." "I comprehend, paternal figure. I shall exercise due circumspection," Icarus affirmed with a grave inclination of his head. They secured their engineered wings onto their persons and ascended to the zenith of the intricate maze, where a slender aperture permitted the ingress of ambient illumination. Daedalus initiated the perilous descent, unfurling his constructed pinions before launching himself from the precipice. For an agonizing instant, he experienced an uncontrolled plummet, causing Icarus's vital organ to seize in trepidation. Subsequently, the meticulously crafted wings engaged with the atmospheric currents, propelling Daedalus skyward, effectively liberating him from the confines of his protracted incarceration within the labyrinthine structure. Icarus emulated his father's audacious leap, and the ensuing sensory experience proved to be even more sublime than his most fervent, youthful fantasies had depicted. The profound perception of gravitic release, of being sustained solely by the subtle interplay of atmospheric currents and delicate plumage, engendered an intoxicating euphoria. His gaze descended, observing the intricate maze diminishing into an insignificant miniature beneath him. Subsequently, his eyes ascended to behold the boundless azure expanse, unfurling infinitely across every conceivable vector. They navigated the aerial currents in unison above the prominent island of Crete, with Daedalus meticulously charting the course and Icarus maintaining a vigilant proximity. The meticulously planned egress was unfolding with impeccable precision. They had achieved the coveted state of liberty. Their familial bond remained unbroken, and together they partook in an unprecedented human endeavor, a feat of aerial transcendence previously unknown to mankind. During the initial 60 minutes of their aerial journey, Icarus adhered with unwavering fidelity to his father's precise directives. He judiciously maintained the prescribed elevation, assiduously avoiding both excessive ascent and perilous descent. He sustained a consistent velocity and refrained from any perilous or experimental aerial acrobatics. He epitomized the exemplary pupil, characterized by his meticulous circumspection and unwavering compliance. However, as the temporal progression of their flight unfolded, Icarus commenced to experience an escalating sense of self-assurance. The constructed wings now felt like an organic extension, seamlessly integrated with his shoulders, and the act of aerial navigation began to appear effortlessly facile. He initiated contemplations regarding the potential exhilaration of accelerating his velocity, elevating his altitude, and executing more audacious aerial maneuvers. He commenced to grasp the inherent elation that avian creatures appeared to manifest as they traversed the celestial expanse. Daedalus, his attention intently consecrated to the intricate art of navigation and the vigilant surveillance of prospective perils, remained oblivious to Icarus's gradual upward deviation. The youthful aviator found himself utterly captivated by the panoramic vista unfolding beneath him, igniting an insatiable desire for further visual exploration. He pondered the aesthetic transformation the terrestrial realm would undergo from an even more elevated vantage point. He mused upon the precise degree of proximity he could achieve to the solar orb before discomfort encroached. The celestial luminary, from this elevated perspective, presented a truly resplendent spectacle, radiating a brilliance and warmth far exceeding its terrestrial appearance. Icarus experienced an irresistible magnetic pull towards its radiant glow, akin to the heliotropic inclination of blossoms towards the sun's benevolent rays. He initiated a further ascent, the exhilaration of exploring this novel aerial domain eclipsing the paternal admonitions from his memory. Initially, the heightened elevation imbued him with a profound sense of exhilaration. The atmospheric density diminished, accompanied by a perceptible decrease in temperature, and Icarus perceived himself to be ascending into the very domain of the Olympian deities. His visual range extended unimpeded across vast distances in every cardinal direction, and the terrestrial sphere beneath him presented itself as an exquisitely rendered cartographic tapestry, unfurled solely for his visual gratification. However, with each meter of his continued ascent, the sun's relentless thermal energy commenced its deleterious influence upon the wax components of his wings. The very substance that had maintained its structural integrity and robust consistency at lower altitudes now yielded, becoming malleable and ductile under the fervent solar onslaught. Viscous droplets of liquefied wax commenced their descent from his aerial apparatus, simultaneously with the dislodgement of individual feathers. Icarus apprehended the escalating predicament with a fatal delay. By the moment he fully assimilated the catastrophic disintegration of his wings, his current elevation rendered any prospect of a controlled, safe descent utterly impossible. He attempted to vocalize a desperate cry to his father, yet Daedalus remained significantly distant beneath him, steadfastly maintaining the predetermined, secure flight path. The engineered wings underwent a rapid and irreversible process of dissolution once the initial degradation commenced. Feathers dispersed chaotically into the prevailing air currents, and the adhesive wax, once the binding agent, wept away in mournful, molten rivulets. Icarus thrashed his limbs in a frantic, futile attempt to maintain his aerial suspension. Yet divested of his artificial pinions, he was reduced to nothing more than a mortal child plummeting uncontrollably through the vast expanse of the firmament. Daedalus's ears registered the anguished lamentations of his son, prompting him to cast his gaze skyward, where he beheld Icarus's precipitate descent towards the boundless ocean. He made a desperate, soaring ascent, harboring the forlorn hope of intercepting his son, or at the very least reaching him prior to his impact with the aquatic surface. Alas, such an intervention proved utterly unattainable. The vertical separation was insurmountable, and Icarus's descent velocity was irrevocably rapid. The young boy collided with the tumultuous waves, generating a splash that, in its diminutive scale, seemed incongruously understated for a catastrophe of such profound magnitude. By the moment Daedalus arrived at the tragic location, naught remained save for a scattering of feathers adrift upon the water's surface and the lingering, spectral reverberation of his son's ultimate lament. Daedalus meticulously orbited the desolate expanse for protracted hours, his voice hoarse from repeatedly invoking Icarus's name, clinging to a fragile, desperate hope that his progeny had miraculously evaded the clutches of fate. Nevertheless, the unforgiving ocean had irrevocably absorbed the young life, and no measure of diligent reconnaissance could effect his retrieval. Ultimately, Daedalus found himself compelled to persist on his solitary trajectory. He attained a secure refuge, yet the otherwise monumental triumph of his liberation was irrevocably eclipsed by the profound bereavement stemming from his son's demise. He had indeed secured his cherished autonomy, but at a harrowing cost that transmuted the very essence of victory into an oppressive sensation of profound vanquishment. The narrative of Icarus subsequently crystallized into a poignant admonitory fable, underscoring the inherent perils of unbridled aspiration and the crucial imperative of heeding sagacious counsel. Moreover, it simultaneously functions as an exposition on the inherently ambivalent character of human aspirations. The identical cognitive faculty of inventiveness and the same fervent drive that empowered Daedalus to engineer the miraculous wings inadvertently guided Icarus towards his fatal over-proximity to the solar inferno. It is plausible that the more profound instructional takeaway resides not in the absolute suppression of ambition, but rather in its judicious equipoise with sagacity and prudent circumspection. Aspirations are inherently designed to elevate our spirits and propel our progress, yet their imprudent or unrestrained pursuit can equally precipitate us into perilous circumstances. The celestial expanse, while undeniably immense and aesthetically captivating, concurrently encompasses inherent perils demanding both profound deference and meticulous navigational acumen. As slumber gently beckons your consciousness this evening, you may find yourself contemplating your individual aspirations and the loftier objectives you harbor. To what stratospheric pinnacles do you endeavor to ascend? What judicious safeguards will you implement to guarantee that your arduous expedition towards those elevated objectives is characterized by both audacious resolve and uncompromised security. A venerable maxim posits the prudence of exercising caution in one's desires, for the very object of one's yearning might indeed materialize. This subsequent chronicle delineates the fate of a monarch who received the precise fulfillment of his perceived aspirations, only to ascertain, through bitter experience, that occasionally our most profound yearnings possess the latent capacity to transmute into our most grievous afflictions. Monarch Midas exercised dominion over the realm of Phrygia, a sovereign state of modest geographical dimensions, yet considerable economic flourishing, situated within the geopolitical boundaries of contemporary Turkey. His regency was, in numerous respects, characterized by laudable governance. He exhibited equitable justice towards his populace, dispensed munificent charity to the indigent, and demonstrated exceptional acumen in the administration of his kingdom's intricate affairs. Nevertheless, Midas harbored a singular, pervasive predilection that permeated and defined every facet of his existence, an unreserved adoration for auric metal. This was not merely a conventional or superficial approbation of material affluence. Midas harbored an authentic, profound, and almost obsessive captivation with gold in its intrinsic material essence. He cherished its inherent chromatic brilliance, its substantial specific gravity, and its immutable resilience against oxidation and degradation. He was enamored by its scintillating capacity to capture and refract incident light, and by the silken, comforting warmth it imparted when cradled within his grasp. He devoted countless hours within the hallowed confines of his royal treasury, not for the mundane purpose of monetary enumeration, but solely for the profound aesthetic contemplation of his myriad auric artifacts. His palatial residence was replete with an opulent array of gilded adornments, furniture crafted from the precious metal, and dining implements fashioned from lustrous gold. He was accustomed to bedecking each digit with a golden circlet, and adorning his neck with multiple strands of golden chains. His retinue of attendants would, in hushed and deferential tones, jest amongst themselves that if the sovereign Midas possessed the means to coat the very walls of his abode with liquid gold, he would have, without hesitation, executed such an extravagant embellishment. King Midas, despite exhibiting a profound fascination with precious gold, was not characterized as an avaricious sovereign. He conscientiously refrained from imposing burdensome levies upon his subjects, or instigating military conflicts solely to augment his personal fortune. The substantial reserves of gold he commanded had been amassed through honorable commercial endeavors and the prudent stewardship of his kingdom's abundant resources. Nevertheless, it was widely observed that his singular devotion to gold was intensifying with each passing season, prompting a degree of apprehension among some who pondered whether this escalating predilection might eventually manifest as a significant predicament. Then, on a particular day, as King Midas ambled through the serene expanse of his ornate palatial grounds, he chanced upon an elderly gentleman slumbering peacefully beneath the fragrant canopy of a rosebush. It was immediately evident that this individual was neither a palace retainer nor a groundskeeper. His attire, unfamiliar and exotic, suggested a person who had undertaken an arduous and extensive journey, bearing the visible marks of considerable travel. Furthermore, he was evidently inebriated to a considerable degree, exuding a potent aroma of fermented grapes and uttering incoherent murmurs in his somnolent state. A monarch of lesser benevolence might have swiftly ordered the trespasser apprehended or summarily expelled from the royal domain. However, Midas, possessing a more compassionate disposition, found himself intrigued by the enigmatic visitor. He keenly observed that, despite the man's rather unkempt visage and rumpled garments, he wore a distinctive circlet fashioned from verdant ivy leaves, a clear and unmistakable emblem signifying an affiliation with the Olympian deities. Midas promptly instructed his attendants to escort the unfamiliar individual into the opulent confines of the palace, where they were to provide him with a nourishing repast and fresh apparel. Once the man had regained his sobriety, he identified himself as Silenus, a satyr functioning as both confidant and mentor to Dionysus, the revered god of wine and celebration. Silenus then elucidated that he had inadvertently become separated from Dionysus amidst the joyous chaos of an especially boisterous bacchanalian revelry. He had since been roaming aimlessly for several days, fruitlessly endeavoring to rejoin the divine retinue. While profoundly appreciative of King Midas's magnanimity, he expressed an urgent impatience to be reunited with his divine lord. King Midas, demonstrating his generous spirit, immediately orchestrated Silenus's secure conveyance back to Dionysus. Recognizing the considerable expedition ahead, the monarch furnished protective escorts, ample provisions, and a commodious carriage to ensure a comfortable passage. Notably, Midas sought no recompense whatsoever for these provisions. He was merely extending his innate hospitality to a sojourner in genuine distress, acting purely out of benevolence. Upon being restored to the company of Dionysus, Silenus promptly recounted to the deity the magnanimous conduct of King Midas. Dionysus, in turn, was profoundly moved by this demonstration of benevolence, particularly noting that Midas had extended aid to an unknown individual, devoid of any prior knowledge of his identity or anticipation of recompense. Consequently, the god resolved to bestow upon Midas a singular boon. He subsequently manifested before the king in a nocturnal vision, explaining his desire to proffer a suitable recompense for the graciousness extended to Silenus. "You are at liberty to articulate any object of your heart's yearning," Dionysus declared. "However, I implore you to deliberate with utmost circumspection and select with sagacity." King Midas required no prolonged deliberation whatsoever. His response was instantaneous, propelled by his enduring, profound ardor for auric splendor. "My fervent desire," he articulated, "is that all that my hands come into contact with shall forthwith transmute into pure, resplendent gold." A subtle furrow appeared on Dionysus's brow. "Are you absolutely certain of this petition?" he inquired, his tone tinged with a hint of reservation. "This is a boon of considerable magnitude, and its effects are not readily reversible." Midas, unwavering in his conviction, affirmed, "I am indeed certain. No other endowment could possibly bring me greater felicity than possessing the ability to transmute substances into gold through mere epidermal contact." With a discernible degree of hesitation, Dionysus acceded to the king's fervent request. The divine pantheon, after all, possessed ample historical precedent regarding the impetuous petitions of mortals, which seldom culminated in propitious outcomes. Nevertheless, King Midas had demonstrated exceptional kindness towards Silenus, and thus, in the eyes of the god, he merited the fulfillment of his articulated desire. When King Midas arose with the dawn on the ensuing morn, a lingering doubt prompted him to ponder the veracity of his nocturnal visitation. With cautious apprehension, He extended his hand tentatively to touch his wooden bedpost. In that very instant, the humble timber transmuted into resplendent, gleaming gold. Encouraged, he then applied his touch to his pillow, which likewise became a golden cushion, undeniably beautiful to behold, yet palpably unyielding and devoid of comfort. His blanket, too, yielded to his new ability, transforming into a magnificent golden drapery, gorgeous in its luster, but impossibly, unbearably ponderous. A surge of exhilaration coursed through Midas. The divine boon had indeed been bestowed. He sprang from his bedchamber with unbridled enthusiasm, making contact with every available object within his private chambers. His garments became golden raiment, rigid and utterly impractical for vestment. His looking-glass transmuted into a golden mirror, possessing a dazzling, yet impractical, reflective quality that rendered it unsuitable for its intended purpose. His wash basin, too, became a golden vessel, of such immense value as to preclude its utilitarian function. He hastened through the expansive corridors of his royal residence, touching walls, articles of furniture, and ornate decorations. Every article upon which his fingers alighted was instantly transformed into flawless, aesthetically pleasing gold. His retinue of servants observed with a mixture of awe and incredulity as their king metamorphosed his abode into an auric palatial complex, surpassing in splendor any edifice previously conceived or constructed by human hands. However, the initial harbinger of difficulty manifested when King Midas endeavored to attire himself. His newly acquired golden clothes proved exceedingly rigid and ponderous, rendering them impossible for comfortable wear. He then attempted to don his customary garments, but the instant his digits made contact with them, they too became immutably golden and utterly unwearable. Consequently, he ultimately found himself compelled to solicit the assistance of his attendants for the act of dressing, exercising extreme vigilance to avoid direct epidermal contact with any object. The subsequent intimation of impending calamity arose during his morning repast. When Midas attempted to partake of sustenance, all foodstuffs transmuted into pure gold. The instant the bread approached his lips, it became a golden loaf, aesthetically pleasing, yet utterly unpalatable. The fruit, too, became golden fruit, flawless in its external presentation, but entirely beyond consumption. Even the wine intended to quench his thirst solidified into a stream of molten gold, descending with metallic viscosity down his throat. Midas then apprehended the stark reality that he was precluded from consuming any comestibles prior to their instantaneous auric transformation. He endeavored to employ cutlery, but these implements were instantly gilded upon his touch. He even sought the assistance of his attendants to spoon-feed him, yet the nourishment solidified into gold the very instant it crossed the threshold of his lips. As the inaugural day drew to its close, Midas found himself afflicted by gnawing hunger and parching thirst, commencing to grasp the profound and tragic implications of his divine endowment. He had, undeniably, received the precise boon he had so ardently requested. Yet, in his fervent desire, he had failed utterly to contemplate the tangible ramifications. A series of agonizing questions now plagued his mind. By what means could mere existence be sustained if the fundamental act of alimentation was rendered impossible? Furthermore, what vestiges of human interaction could possibly endure if every physical contact resulted in auric petrification? The ultimate heart-rending catastrophe, however, occurred when his beloved, innocent daughter hastened towards him with joyful anticipation. She had been sojourning with kin in a distant locale and had thus been separated from her paternal figure for a span of multiple days. Eager to learn of the peculiar occurrences that had transpired within the palace during her absence, she rushed into his embrace before any intervention could be made to avert the impending disaster. The instant Midas's paternal arms enveloped his child, she instantaneously transmuted into a magnificent, albeit lifeless, golden effigy. She was exquisitely rendered, flawless in every minute particular, yet utterly devoid of all vital animation, incapable of articulate speech, physical locomotion, joyous laughter, sorrowful weeping, or the very act of respiration. She remained merely an auric sculpture, forever arrested in the tender posture of filial embrace with her father. Midas collapsed to his knees in abject despair beside the inert golden statue of his daughter, unbidden tears coursing freely down his anguished countenance. He had ardently yearned for the faculty to generate gold, yet he had never once contemplated that such an endowment would unequivocally preclude any physical contact with sentient beings. While he had undeniably acquired boundless riches, he had simultaneously forfeited all elements that imbued material prosperity with genuine significance. Of what conceivable utility was auric splendor if he was forever isolated from the capacity to share it with another soul? What true worth could any hoard of treasure possess if its acquisition necessitated the tragic forfeiture of his ability to embrace his beloved daughter? He had, for so long, harbored the conviction that gold represented the paramount treasure in the entire world. But in this moment of profound sorrow, he now comprehended with crystalline clarity that filial affection, profound human connection, and the unadorned joys of existence held immeasurably greater intrinsic value than any conceivable quantity of precious metal. Consumed by an overwhelming desperation to revoke his ill-conceived boon, Midas prostrated himself in fervent supplication before Dionysus, imploring divine clemency and the immediate cessation of his auric faculty. He confessed his profound imprudence, admitting that he had utterly failed to grasp the true ramifications of his petition, and declared that he would willingly relinquish all, even his very kingdom, for the restoration of his beloved child. Dionysus, who had, with divine foresight, anticipated precisely such a lamentable turn of events, promptly manifested before Midas, bearing a remedial directive. "Proceed without delay to the sacred currents of the river Pactolus," he instructed. "Immerse yourself fully within its hallowed waters, and your auric endowment shall be purged and dissolved. Thereafter, return to your domain and liberally sprinkle the sanctified liquid upon all objects you desire to revert to their pristine original state." Midas, without hesitation, hastened with utmost urgency towards the designated river. He submerged his entire being within its flowing currents, and in that moment, he perceived the golden faculty recede from his person, akin to an immense burden being miraculously unladen from his shoulders. He then gathered a generous quantity of the vital fluid into a substantial earthen vessel and made his way back to his royal abode, where he meticulously sprinkled the collected water upon the inert golden effigy of his daughter. Gradually, the auric sheen receded from her form, and she was miraculously restored to animation and vitality. She appeared bewildered and understandably apprehensive by the inexplicable events that had transpired. Nevertheless, she was possessed of breath and vibrant life, and most profoundly, capable of embracing her paternal figure anew. Midas tenderly embraced her, marveling at the exquisite sensation of her warm, animate form nestled securely within his arms. Chutom. He devoted the remainder of the day to meticulously restoring his royal dwelling to its original functional state, assiduously applying the sanctified river water to the myriad gilded articles he had created. A select few items he permitted to retain their auric transformation, certain ornamental pieces that served as a poignant memento of his extraordinary ordeal, yet posed no impediment to the practicalities of quotidian existence. However, the vast majority of objects he reverted to their inherent forms, now demonstrating a distinct preference for the rustic charm of timber, the sturdy permanence of stone, and the comforting pliability of fabric over the austere, unfeeling perfection of gold. From that pivotal day forward, Midas emerged as a profoundly transformed individual. He continued to acknowledge gold's inherent beauty and utility, yet his former overwhelming fixation had utterly dissipated. He now comprehended with newfound clarity that life's most invaluable treasures, such as profound affection, loyal companionship, nourishing sustenance, comfortable attire, and purposeful endeavor, were utterly beyond acquisition or creation through the mere accumulation of material riches. Consequently, he earned a widespread reputation as a sagacious monarch who consistently prioritized the welfare of his populace over the contents of his royal coffers. He frequently recounted to visiting dignitaries and courtiers the narrative of his golden touch, not as a means to vaunt his extraordinary encounter with a divine entity, but rather to impart a solemn admonition regarding the perils inherent in unchecked desire. Exercise extreme circumspection in your desires, he would sagely counsel, for the universe may indeed grant them, with unforeseen and profound repercussions. The enduring narrative of King Midas serves as a timeless cautionary tale, underscoring the truth that our most profound aspirations frequently manifest with unforeseen and often unwelcome repercussions. While it is inherent in human nature to yearn for affluence, professional triumph, or authoritative influence, it is imperative to meticulously contemplate the potential renunciations that might accompany their attainment. Indeed, on occasion, the objects of our most fervent yearning prove to be of significantly lesser worth than the invaluable possessions we already hold. As you prepare to embrace the tranquility of slumber this very evening, you might find it beneficial to engage in introspective contemplation regarding your personal aspirations and yearnings. What specific attainments do you ardently hope to secure within the span of your existence? What cherished elements are you prepared to relinquish in pursuit of these objectives? And crucially, what invaluable blessings do you currently possess that you would be utterly unwilling to forfeit in the relentless pursuit of novel acquisitions? Indeed, some profound challenges cannot be surmounted by brute force alone, and certain monstrous figures are often steeped in more sorrow than actual terror. This particular chronicle recounts the journey of a burgeoning hero who came to understand that the most formidable segment of any grand undertaking is not the climactic confrontation with the adversary. Rather, it is the intricate and often arduous path of finding one's way back to the familiar comforts of home. Theseus, the legitimate offspring of Aegeus, the revered sovereign of Athens, did not, however, experience his formative years within the regal confines of a palace. His devoted mother had instead nurtured him in a modest, secluded town, where she would regale him with captivating tales of his father, yet meticulously concealed the king's true identity. She had imparted upon him a sacred directive, once Theseus had amassed sufficient strength to dislodge a specific, colossal boulder. He would uncover beneath it certain emblems that would unequivocally reveal his noble lineage. As Theseus matured, he became utterly preoccupied with this monumental stone. With unwavering dedication, he would make daily pilgrimages to its location, relentlessly pitting his burgeoning physical prowess against the unyielding mass. For a span of many years, the boulder stubbornly refused to budge, irrespective of the immense effort he exerted, or the myriad distinct techniques he painstakingly attempted. Nevertheless, he possessed an indomitable spirit, characterized by both patience and persistence, ensuring he never relinquished his determined pursuit. Eventually, on the significant occasion of his 18th birthday, Theseus finally succeeded in moving the obdurate boulder. Beneath its formidable weight, he unearthed a finely crafted sword and a pair of sturdy sandals, both of which had once belonged to his progenitor. At this pivotal moment, his mother at last unveiled the truth. He was, in fact, the son of King Aegeus, and the time had arrived for him to embark on a momentous journey to Athens and assert his rightful position as the legitimate heir to the illustrious throne. The ensuing journey towards Athens was fraught with considerable peril. The ancient thoroughfares were known to be infested with brigands, prowling wild animals, and a variety of mythical creatures that mercilessly preyed upon unsuspecting travelers. While the vast majority of individuals opted to undertake the voyage by ship, a route universally acknowledged as both safer and considerably swifter, Theseus deliberately chose to traverse the land on foot. This decision was partly driven by an innate desire to test the limits of his courage and physical might, and partly fueled by an ardent yearning for thrilling exploits and unforeseen adventures. During his arduous trek, he confronted numerous trials, vanquishing outlaws and formidable beasts that had terrorized the roads and their users for countless years. By the time he ultimately arrived in Athens, he had already established a formidable renown as a valiant hero. King Aegeus greeted him warmly, acknowledging him as his long-lost son and legitimate successor. And the citizenry of Athens collectively rejoiced in the arrival of their nascent royal. However, Theseus's advent coincided with a period of significant adversity. The city-state of Athens found itself subjected to a dire predicament.